For this video, we're going to be looking at congruent figures. So first of all, we need to understand what the word congruent means. So congruent means when you have two shapes, for instance, that are the exact same size and they are the exact same shape. So the two triangles that I have here, they're the exact same size and they're the exact same shape. It may not look like it just because one has been rotated, but I could take one and I can, oops, that actually made it a little bit bigger, but I could rotate it around. You kind of get the idea. But see that they would be the exact same shape, exact same size. So just because it's been moved a little bit, that's not going to change anything. Just make sure you pay attention to the size of it. Make sure they're the same. So, two things that all congruent shapes have. So, make sure you get these written down in your notes. All congruent shapes have corresponding sides. So what that means is they have sides from each shape that line up exactly with each other. And then the same thing for the angles. Corresponding angles, they have angles that will match up exactly with each other. So here in just a minute I will show you exactly what that means. Basically what you're looking at is if you overlap the shapes and line them up exactly, you're picking out the sides that match up with each other, and then you're picking out the angles that line up with each other. So let's look at these two parallelograms that we have here. We have parallelogram ABCD right here, and we have parallelogram EFGH over here. So we are going to assume that they are congruent, exact same size, exact same shape. So what I want to do is name all of the corresponding angles of these two parallelograms. Now, one thing that I want to point out to you are these little arcs that I have drawn. Okay, angle D has one arc on it, angle A has two, angle B has three, and angle C has four. And then the same thing over on this parallelogram. So what those tell you are the angles that have one arc on them will measure the exact same thing. So if I told you that angle D was 70 degrees, it's got one arc on it. So that means angle H would also have to be 70 degrees because it has one arc listed on it. So that just tells you what those two things, or what those arcs mean. So let's go ahead and name all of the corresponding angles. So I'll just go in alphabetical order. So angle A is going to be congruent, and this is our symbol for congruent, an equal sign with a little squiggly line above it. So angle A is congruent to angle E. They both have the two arcs on them. Angle B would be congruent to angle F. Angle C is going to be congruent to angle G. And then finally, angle D is going to be congruent to angle H. Okay, and if I were to, let me see if it'll, no, it's just going to move the letters. But if I were to slide parallelogram EFGH right over and line it up exactly with ABCD, you would see that A and E would line up exactly with each other, B and F would, C and G would, and D and F would all line up exactly with each other. All right, now, those were angles. Now we're going to look at corresponding sides. So here I have two triangles. So we're looking at sides. So one thing that I've done is I put little hash marks in each of the sides. Okay, so just like with the angles, if it has one hash mark, those sides will be congruent. If it has two hash marks, those will be congruent, and 3 hash marks, those will be congruent. So whenever we name our sides here, The side that is black that has one hash mark in it is side AB. So I'll write both of those letters and I'm going to put a line segment above it. So AB is going to be congruent to side DE. Okay, and I color-coded this to kind of help it make a little more sense so you could visualize it. Another side, let's do the red side along the bottom. So that would be AC is congruent to side DF. And then finally the blue side is side BC is going to be congruent to EF. So that covers corresponding angles and corresponding sides. So if you know two shapes are congruent, you'll be able to pick out the angles that correspond with each other and the sides that correspond with each other. Now, let's look at this question. Which square is congruent to square A? So this one shouldn't be very difficult at all. Square A is right here. Okay, notice that all of the sides are 8 units long. So to pick the one that is congruent, we need to pick the one that is the exact same size. Well, square B is not the same size because they're all 9 units long. So that leaves us with square C. So square C, and we're going to go ahead and explain because it's the same size as A. To be congruent, they have to be the exact same size. All right, and then finally, last one we're going to look at, I have two trapezoids here. I have trapezoid ABCD on the left, and then I have trapezoid JKLM over on the right. I gave you this piece of information right here. Those two trapezoids are congruent, so that means they are the exact same size. So the first thing I want to know is JM, side JM. I want to know how long that side is. So I'm going to find side JM, and that's this bottom side right here. So how long is that side going to be? Well, if they're congruent, it matches up or it corresponds with AD over here. So that means that side JM has to be 10 units long. Okay, let's look at LM. Side LM is over here on the right. So it's going to match up with side CD. So it has to be 8 units long. And then the final question I'm going to look at is, what is the perimeter of JKLM? So remember, the perimeter is the distance all the way around. Well, if these two trapezoids are congruent, that means they're the exact same. So if I find the perimeter of trapezoid ABCD, then the perimeter for JKLM has to be the exact same. So to find perimeter, all we have to do is add all of the sides together. So we have 10 plus 8 plus 6 plus 8, and I'll add all of those together. So 10 plus 8 is 18, 6 plus 8 is 14, and then add those together and you get 32. So the perimeter of that trapezoid is 32. So here we looked at congruent figures. So to be congruent, they have to be the exact same size, exact same shape. And we looked at picking out the corresponding angles, what angles match up from each picture, and then what sides match up from each picture.